If you could take a guess.
30%.
30%? Anyone else? Take a shot, stab at it. We have about 110%. All right. We have so much that because not only do we have so many copies to look through the New Testament, but if we didn't have any books of the New Testament at all, going just through the church fathers' writings and their commentaries and their diaries, we could actually piece together the entire New Testament. We have so much stuff that we don't even have enough scholars to actually go through all of the amount of information that we have. It's really embarrassing, as Christians, that we have this much resource. So when people ask you, well, do you have the original? Well, it's like, yes, we do, but we have to go through a lot of stuff in order to piece it back together. And the way that we do that is by, first we'll compare it to ancient manuscripts. So I know you're wondering this one. Okay, wow. What about the other ancient manuscripts? How good do they hold up? If we have 25,000. This is in the next to last sheet that you have in those. I printed this chart out for you. If you look at Caesar's Gallic Wars, it was written between 144 BC. Earliest copy is 900 AD. So that gives us a time span of about 1,000 years, and we have 10 copies, which is really good. That's really, really good for an ancient manuscript, especially at that time. A lot of people will go next, and you can look through all these. Plato, if you look at that, we have 7 copies. Technically, we're not really that sure about what Plato said. Only 7 copies, but it's better than 1. I mean, if you have 1 copy, that's nice. But the more copies that you have, the more you can compare them and see how they work out. 1,300-year time span with that. Homer's Iliad was written in 900 BC. Earliest copy is 400 AD, and that's 1,500 years. And we have 643 copies of those. That's really good. That's excellent to have that. But then we come to the New Testament, which was written between 50 and 90 AD, give or take. The earliest copy we have, or fragment, is 125 AD, and the time span is about 25 years. And we have over 25,000 copies. That's really, really different than the rest of them. Now, arguments have been posed to me. Well, you're talking about the New Testament, which is 27 books. Okay? You break down those 27 books, and you get a number just like Homer's Iliad. And you could say, you have that equal amount of number. But what they're not giving you is the time span. You give me 1,500 years, I can produce more than 600 manuscripts for the New Testament, especially since the printing press came along at that point, and then we really started getting a lot of them.
These aren't just handwritten copies?
The 25,000, yeah, those are handwritten. These would all be handwritten copies. So. All right, so let's look at it as a book of man. People would say that the Bible is just a copy of a copy, like the telephone game. In your notes, I put the copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. Some people take it up to 7. It depends on who they are. But unlike the telephone game, I mean, the object of the telephone game is to, have one person say one thing, and by the time it gets to the end, they say what it is. And you're not really motivated to keep it straight. You're not really motivated to be accurate. And the telephone game is verbal. This is print. And we really don't have any indication that people would copy out a manuscript and then destroy the old one. They would copy it out, and then they'd have 2 copies, and maybe they'd copy it out in, different number of times. And then even a generation or 2, I think Tertullian makes the argument in the 2nd century that we're pretty sure of what we have because we can go back and check the originals. I mean, those churches are still around. We can go. It may be a little bit hyperbolic in what he's saying, a little argumentative, but he's saying, hey, we can go and check the originals. We're that close to it. So they weren't in the habit of destroying their own. Textual criticism is the science of reconstructing the original text of Scripture based upon the available manuscript evidence. All right. Think of this as like baking a cake. If you have one person who's made a cake, and boy, they made it really good, and it is a delicious cake, but they wrote down the recipe, or had the recipe, and 10 people copied it, and then they lost their original recipe, could they still get their recipe back? Sure. Even if there were mistakes that other people made, because 10 people are not going to make the same 10 mistakes in the same places. So they could look at all the other ones and say, oh, okay, and start piecing it together. It's actually a very easy science to do. It's just extremely tedious. There's only about 20 New Testament textual critics in the world. And it's, something that they love doing, just sitting there staring at ancient manuscripts and producing things like that I have, Okay, so what about all the errors? Are you sitting there thinking, what errors? The Bible doesn't have any errors in it. Well, many times there are errors made by the scribes who copied both the Old and New Testament. There are about 400,000 copyist errors in the New Testament alone, roughly. When was the last time you heard this in church? Never. This is something we don't talk about. We don't like to say that. Say, okay, look, the New Testament has 400,000 errors in it. Now, please open your infallible word to. We don't do that. But remember, these are errors in the transmission, not in what was originally written. I know in the Evangelical Free Church, we say that we believe in the inspiration of the original manuscripts, what was originally written, not in the copies that came down. Because when miraculous things happen, natural laws will take place. Whenever Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, did he die again? Yeah. Whenever he turned the water into wine, okay, it's going to be consumed. It's going to be, fermented more, turned into vinegar, or if you don't believe you turn into wine, grape juice, it eventually will become, wine. Every time something happens, there is always, a natural process that takes place after the miracle because of the fallen state of the world, because of, sin nature. So we would hope to see this type of thing. That just shows, that it's not, there is no, it's very difficult to make the argument of what's called the doctrine of preservation, that we have one manuscript that was perfectly preserved the whole way down. I've heard people try to make that argument with the New Testament, but with the Old Testament, it just doesn't hold water. And unless you want to say that God's schizophrenic, and he does that with the New Testament but not the Old, you would have problems. So I'd just rather say, listen, I'm really sure, and we can actually work these copies errors out. Now, 400,000 of them, okay? That is a lot of them, and we're gonna go over all of them today also. So, you laugh. I've done this before. We can actually do it. The different readings among the manuscripts are called variants because they vary. So we wouldn't call them errors. These variants or errors are worked out through a process called textual criticism. Now, 99% of these variants make no theological difference whatsoever. Okay? Of the 1% that do, none of them affect any major doctrine at all. All right? So, right now we are going to go through the 99%.